New Thought Media Network proudly presents a weekly exploration of various spiritual practices with renowned spiritual authors, coaches, teachers, and Dr. Tracy Brown, RScP.
And now, here's Tracy.
Hey everybody, it's Tracy Brown, and you are here with Poetry, Prayer, and Practice, where every Tuesday at noon Mountain Time, we get the opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into poetry, how it's a spiritual practice, or how poetry can bring us, inspire us in our spiritual practice. Poetry, prayer, where every few weeks we really take a deep dive into prayer, understanding more about how prayer works and what it does and doesn't do, what its purpose is and is not. And then we're always talking about spiritual practices. Now, there are a lot of shows that focus on prayer and meditation, especially. And then you probably get a fair amount around affirmations. And we talk about all of those, but I really, really love it when I'm able to focus on things that maybe you don't hear so much about, or to talk to people about what they do that they consider spiritual practice that many of us may not have ever thought about. And that can range from something like, people who their physical activity, running, jogging, right? Or for me, roller skating, really can feel like spiritual practice and can be used in a way that is spiritual practice. And so on the show, Poetry, Prayer, and Practices, we actually get an opportunity to talk about some of those different ways. We also, on Poetry, Prayer, Practice, have the opportunity to dive into ways that culture affects our spiritual practice. And so if you've hung out with me a few times, then you probably have noticed and remember some of the conversations where we talk about how individual cultural background or cultural norms and experiences may impact our perception about spiritual practice or our way of engaging with spiritual practice. And I'm thinking that today will be one of those days where we get into that a little bit as well, because in a minute or two, I'll be bringing in my guest for today, and that is Reverend Victoria Bomberry, and we'll be talking about a variety of things. So just get ready for that. I want to say hi to Shay. I see that you are here with us today. It's always so great to see you and be reminded that we have people who are participating in New Thought Media Network from all over the globe. And Wayne, it is so fabulous, always fabulous to have you with us as well. So if you are watching and you want to say hello in the chat or in the comments, let us know your name and where you are watching or where you are based. Because sometimes I'm watching from one city, but I'm not at home base in Dallas, Texas. And that could be true for you. So that's what the show is about. Every Tuesday at 12 noon Mountain Time. Please mark your calendars. Got some amazing guests coming up over the next couple of months. So you'll want to stay connected and check out the New Thought Media Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. If you're not able to watch live, you can always go to those two places and find the recordings. So I mentioned that today my featured guest is Reverend Victoria Bomberry, and I love being in conversation with Reverend Victoria. She is one of the colleagues that together we are part of the team for the Saturday morning Science of Mind conversations right here on the New Thought Media Network. But usually one of us is presenting and we don't get to just chat about stuff. So I am glad she accepted my invitation to come on today's show and just chat about poetry, prayer, and spiritual practice. So, do I need to tell you anything about Reverend Victoria? Yeah, I'll tell you. Let me see. Let me give myself a number. I'm going to share with you 5 things I know about Reverend Victoria. And then when I bring her in, she can add anything else she wants you to know about her. So, Reverend Victoria Bomberry has a PhD also behind her name, Reverend Victoria Bomberry, PhD, because she has a doctorate degree from Stanford University in modern thought and literature. Number 2, Reverend Victoria is recently named as the spiritual director for CSL Menifee Valley, which I want to hear more about. Number 3, Reverend Victoria has served as the Minister of Transformation for CSL Riverside. And I've had people ask me, what does that even mean? So we're going to ask her, like, what does a minister of transformation do? Number 4, Reverend Victoria has served as an active member and leader for the CSL Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. So I don't know if we're going to talk about that at all, but just FYI, you should know she's a badass. And number 5, I already shared with you, she is one of our cohort of leaders experienced in religious science who help to translate that for people who may be new to that by participating as one of the presenters for the Saturday morning Science of Mind conversations right here on the New Thought Media Network. So, 5 things Tracy knows about Reverend Victoria. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Tracy. It's so great to be here. I had a little bit of trouble getting in this morning. I'm traveling, so I'm using my son's computer, and he was working, so I had to kick him off.
Well,
Fortunately, he got finished. He was finished work, and we made the transition.
I am glad that you were able to do that. Moms sometimes have priority over other things. But anytime that you and I get a chance to visit, it's like such a rich gift for me because we're both really busy doing stuff all the time. So I shared 5 things that I know about you. Well, 5 of the many things that I know about you. Is there anything that you would want to add that you'd want our viewers to know about you?
Well, today's my birthday, and so I get to celebrate it with you. I was really thrilled to do that when I saw that I could sign up for the 25th. I said, yes, I'm going to sign up for my birthday to talk about poetry and spiritual practice, some of my favorite things. So, what a way to celebrate my birthday with you, Tracy, and talking about poetry and spiritual practice.
Wow. I don't know that I've ever had anybody on the show on their actual birthday. If I could sing, I would sing happy birthday. But then if I start singing happy birthday, all the people who are watching would be like, okay, I'm done with the show today. That's it. So instead of running people away, we're just going to all go, happy birthday, Reverend Victoria. May the blessings of life continue to flow to you and from you. What a gift you are to the world. What a gift your life is to the world. So grateful to celebrate with you today and always. And so it is.
And so it is. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So,
Woo.
so you asked some questions. You wanted to know about Menifee Valley. This is a new thing for me. I started July 1st, and I am thrilled to be with this beautiful community in Menifee Valley. It's between Riverside and Temecula, if people know Southern California. And it is just a gorgeous little community. And I say little because it was once a very small town, and now it is the third fastest growing city in the United States.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was stunned to hear that because I still think of it as kind of a farming community, right? And a retirement community. And it's changing, like all parts of the world are changing. It's changing right along with it. And I'm really thrilled about it. We have a beautiful center that is located on a couple of acres, and the back part of the property is completely undeveloped. And we have a center that is lovely. And it looks like we're going to become one of the spiritual places on a strip of churches, the way that it's developing right now. We have a church right next door to us, and there's going to be another church. I think a Catholic church is coming in on another property. So there's going to be a whole lineup of churches. And the other day there was a terrible accident right in front of the center, and a car was overturned, and another car was just completely smashed up. And the people walked out of that accident with just minor injuries, like scratches, right? And I thought, well, they had the accident right there where it's all prayed up. So of course they made it out just fine. And so I feel like that energy is there. There's really good feeling about this gorgeous center that was built almost 50 years ago. The 50-year anniversary will be next year. And we're looking forward to that. And we're just so in gratitude for the people who came before us and had the foresight to build this center. And it took them about 10 years to build a center, to raise enough funds to build it. And the awesome thing about it is that the church next door bought a tract of land, and they donated that land to CSL. And
wow.
Yeah, so they donated it because they wanted another church to be there.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
isn't that amazing? So I think that, Menifee is built on, just out of this goodness, God's goodness that just showed up, and everyone worked together to make it happen. So I see us growing and expanding and just being a real presence for that community as it changes and transforms into a place where there's people of all ages and from all kinds of backgrounds. And, it's just a wonderful, wonderful area to be in. So I'm excited about it, very excited. So,
I love that. New, like it's new for you, you're new for them, and you're going to build on such a strong foundation. So,
yeah, that's how I feel. I feel like there's just that spiritual foundation that is tremendous. And, like a lot of places, there was a dip with COVID, and now we're seeing something else take place. And, it's very exciting. I'm really thrilled about it. So it's wonderful to be a part of this next phase in Menifee.
so I also did. I just know that some people were curious and are curious if they're thinking about different roles that they could have leaders play in their spiritual center church or community. I don't know that I've met anyone else who had the title of Minister of Transformation.
Well, that's a word that I have used for all of my life, I would say. Well, since I've become an adult. And transformation is something that I believe in. I believe that we can transform our lives and our world. And I remember when I was in my 20s, I was talking to a woman, and she said, "You say transformation a lot." And I never noticed that, about myself, because sometimes you don't notice what you're saying. You may not be conscious of it, but she pointed it out. And I thought, I do. I use that word a lot because I really do believe that we have the power to transform our lives, first and foremost, and transform the world around us. And, my younger years, I dedicated to working with communities, organizing different things. And, one of the things that I worked in was, organizing health clinics for families, for women and children. And I looked at, transformation taking place on that community level, and, just providing basic services, right, to people who didn't have them. So transformation to me happens at every level, even transforming the way that we grow food, the way that we raise our families, the way that we do all of that. And that's what my life has been dedicated to. So when I went back to Riverside, I said, well, I think that my title should be Minister of Transformation. And, part of that is that I think that we're kind of awakening in CSL to the need for more spiritual activism in our communities. And what a better way to do that than to be a minister of transformation. And what I did was go out and meet with different organizations in the community to see how we could, join forces, find opportunities for our members to volunteer or donate or, have some sort of impact within the community with existing organizations. Because like a lot of places, we don't have a tremendous amount of people who can create a whole program that would be a transformational program for the community, but we can definitely help with other organizations who already have those missions and the structure in place to put us to work. So that was my work in Riverside, and it's something that I carry with me. I really believe in going out into the world and living what we teach, right? What our philosophy is. And, everyone benefits from it, most of all us, right? In doing the work. So, one of the things that I love doing, I love working in the area of migration. And, when we talk about migration, we don't necessarily think of it as something that human beings have been doing since time immemorial, right? Migration is how people have lived, and how our four-leggeds and two-leggeds live as well. Doing these tremendous migrations, and we look at the birds and we see them migrating from place to place, and there's no borders. They fly across different geographies to make their their survival, right? And for I think one of the best things is birds bring us beauty into our lives, and they do all the things that they do that are beneficial to the whole of life. So migration to me is tremendously important. So one of the things that I work with is people who are immigrating, who are migrating into across borders. And I did a pilgrimage recently down to the Mexicali Calexico border in California, and it was a tremendous trip for me, to get to see and meet people who were in the process of seeking asylum in the United States. They were on the Mexican side of the border, but they were entering into the system to get appointments so that they could start the process to become asylum, to seek asylum in the United States. And most people who make that trip will not get asylum in the United States, but they oftentimes will plant and grow where they land. And we've seen these communities that have flourished, have planted and grown where they've landed. And it just is such a testament to the human spirit to see what they do and what they make of so little. And it just fills my heart to see people come together, cooperate, have structure their community in a way that everyone has a job and everyone is contributing something. And I just loved seeing that. And and the flip side of that is on the US side, we have the detention centers where people who don't have money to buy their way out are detained. And they're only the only thing that they've done is cross the border, and they are put in detention centers. And sometimes they may have had a minor infraction. They're here legally going through the process, and they have a minor traffic infraction and they end up in the detention center. So there's a lot of injustice as a part of it. And we have to have some discernment about this. Of course, there are people who will break the rules in a very severe way, and that has consequences. But we have to have some discernment as well, and we have to have real justice. And so I got to see two sides of this. The people who are going through legally and doing everything right, and still having those difficulties, and people who end up in detention centers separated from their families, and living under very dire conditions, because the detention centers are not places where people are taken care of. They are being repressed. So those are things that we can transform, we can change, we can find places for people and really keep this stuff going, right?
So clearly, service, being in service and being of service is important to you. And related to transformation, right? We're on the New Thought Media Network, and everyone who's connected with New Thought, you take seriously the importance of transformation especially personal transformation. But what I love is that you also have spoken to collective transformation, group transformation, society transformation. But you and I both know that sometimes that conversation about collective transformation or personal transformation is heard from a place of why you're a minister. Why are you talking about these political things like migration and detention of people? Right, that's a political conversation. But you and I know that there is a spiritual foundation for these kinds of conversations. So, how would you, if someone's listening and they're trying to, even if they're agreeing with you and saying, I agree with that, but I think that's political, not spiritual, how would you help them understand the spiritual mandate or the spiritual foundation for addressing these kinds of concerns, or to use your word, injustice?
Well, I do believe that we have at the heart of our teachings the idea that we do no harm. And as human beings, we have choices, and we have the opportunity to create systems that are humane. And it's a spiritual practice, right? To be, I don't think that human beings are imperfect. I believe that we have that perfection built into us. And a part of that coming into that perfection is to perfect our humanness. And to me, part of perfecting our humanness is to build those relationships with people, and to build those relationships. That means that we're creating ways of being with one another. So it's spiritually based. It is not a political thing in terms of parties or, voting or any of that. And, from my kind of teaching, from indigenous teachings, one of the things that the Haudenosaunee say is that politics is the highest form of spirituality. And when I say that, people always go, what? But all politics is how are we relating to one another? How are we connected? How do we really make sure that we're not harming anyone? And how do we create peace for everyone? Not just for ourselves, not just inner peace, although that's very important, but how do we create peace for everyone? And that requires us to have that heart to heart connection with folks, and for us to actively put ourselves in someone else's shoes, right? To do that, to really come to understand where someone else is coming from, and to have that compassion for all. So that's how I see it. I see that, how we relate to one another is where it's at. It's not politics in terms of let's fight and have our ideologies. That's politics. How do we relate to one another?
Mm-hmm. So, what made you say yes to poetry, prayer, and practice? What is it that was like, yes, I want to be on that show, and this is what I want to talk about?
Well, one of the things that, well, I love poetry. Yeah, I love it. I love words. I have a PhD in modern thought and literature. So I love words and I love literature. And so it's, to me, that's where I get fed, right? Reading, and it can be fiction or nonfiction or poetry, but anything that has to do with words, that's where I get my spiritual uplift. And I love poetry. I love all of the I think one of the things that drew me to New Thought or to Centers for Spiritual Living is that the transcendentalists are very important to to people in New Thought. Ralph Waldo Emerson is an antecedent of a lot of the more traditional transcendentalists that we know of, and the Romantic poets who are also kind of antecedents of the American transcendentalists. And I love that poetry because it has to do with right here and now, nature, and as I was saying, those relationships between us and nature and one another. And, I love that. And I think that that's sort of where American literature had its entrance into kind of an indigenous mindset, right? That's how they got it. And I don't think they could have had that same experience had they not connected in some way with place. So that's kind of a short answer to how these things interconnect for me. And I said yes because it's you, Tracy, and because this is what I love.
Yeah, just that opportunity. So, oh, I had a question in my mind and then it just went away. You talked about poetry. Oh, so right now, because if you're like me, you go through cycles or, over time things change. But right now, at this phase of your life, what is your favorite spiritual practice or your one or two favorite spiritual practices and why?
Well, I guess I'd have to say my favorite spiritual practice is the practice of metta, which some people call the loving kindness meditation. I like the another translation of metta is unconditional love,
Mm-hmm.
and I practice it with a group every week. I lead a group, a metta group, and for us, it is a practice of transforming ourselves and transforming the society, because we send loving kindness to people in detention centers. We send love in their families, and we send loving kindness to uh, all of our law enforcement, and we've actively called them our peace officers because we want to actively transform the way that is done, right? So we actively call them peace officers, and we send loving kindness to them, unconditional love to them. So making that connection, and to the leadership of the world leadership, and we and ourselves, right? So we put all that together as what we've chosen as a group to work on, and we've been working on this for the past 6 years, meeting
Mm.
together and doing metta together around those issues. And I truly believe that it has an effect. And I think that one of the things that I've learned in practicing metta is that those things that I find in myself that is there is true for other people. So as I work on that, it has an effect on everyone. So as I clear the way and open my heart more, that makes it possible for other people to do the same. So, we're not only working on ourselves, we're actually working on the whole world. So metta to me is, it has to be my favorite practice. And I've been practicing it for many years. I was a student of Jack Cornfield many years ago, and I learned that practice, and it was the one that I've stuck with for 30 plus years. So I would say that's my favorite.
Well, the moment you said meta, I thought, oh, now that's really interesting from a couple of perspectives. One, it's interesting because on the one level, it's very personal, very individual work, the mindfulness, the choice to see oneself as a part of a bigger and more complex entity, and to be in service or to hold in mind, hold in consciousness that oneness. And at the same time, because you are practicing it intentionally with a group, that it's, the group practice. And I've had so many people over the years just express how much deeper and how much faster they seem to move into the integrity of a spiritual practice, whether it's meditation or metta, or whether it is um, service, or whether it is prayer, whether it is affirmation, that you can have individual commitment. And when you are doing it as part of a group, it becomes deeper, faster. So, um, so I love that. I don't, I'm not sure. It's funny. I'm reflecting on myself. I'm in transition, so I'm not sure what my favorite spiritual practice is right now, because I've been shifting them around a lot and doing many different things over the last 6 months, because it was starting to feel a little rote, a little stale, a little like I'm on automatic, but am I really conscious about what I'm doing? So I'm still doing many of the same things, but just not in the same sequence or at the same time of day or with the same people. Um, but the one that seems to be landing most for me right now is journaling, even though I'm not journaling every single day. Um, so I think if I ask myself that question, by the toward the end of the year, right now it feels like journaling is saying everybody else, yes, you're going to do prayer or spiritual mind treatments every day. Yes, yes, you use affirmations a lot, just automatically. And I read a lot of poetry. I write a lot of poetry when I'm journaling. And so I think that poetry is built into the journaling for me. And then, of course, I believe group worship, I believe that service into the community and into the world, all of those are spiritual practices that are doing. And you know me well enough, and some of our watchers and listeners have heard this enough to recognize that for me, roller skating is a spiritual practice, but it's not like the most or my favorite right now.
And you're right. I mean, there's all kinds of spiritual practices, and we kind of put a label on what we think they might be, right? And roller skating, yeah, what a great thing. You're just, to me it sounds like freedom.
Ooh, ooh, I may have to play with that a little bit. But I didn't realize it, oh, maybe about 15 years ago. For a while, I was really enamored with walking meditation. And I shouldn't have been surprised because even way before that, I knew I loved labyrinths and I loved the spiritual practice of being, in a labyrinth and walking a labyrinth. But I had not really connected. That was, for me, was labyrinth. And then, I connected the walking meditation with, oh, that is what I'm doing when I'm walking a labyrinth. And then for a while, I was really like, I'm going to do walking meditation every day. And I realized that skating for me, roller skating for me, is much like a moving meditation. So I'm not walking, but I am clearing my brain. I am focusing on one thing or no thing, and, other than dodging people. And I don't have to think about that. So my brain, it ends up having the same result as a great meditation because it's physical, my body is moving, but I'm open. I'm
It's
open.
beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a poem in itself.
Maybe it is. Maybe it is. So our time is winding down. We have about 8 minutes remaining, 8 to 10 minutes max. And I want to, I'm going to ask you my question first, and then I'm
Okay.
going to let you, like, what else that we haven't talked about would you like to talk about? So you mentioned indigenous culture, and I know that about you as well. And I'm just curious if you are familiar with this book that I'm about to hold up, and if you are, if you have any comments about it. And if you're not, then we'll just move on. So it is the First Nations version of the New Testament. It is an indigenous translation of the New Testament.
And who is the author?
And so the author is listed as a group, even though there is a name. Let me go to the page and see if I can find it. They purposely did not use one person's name. Um, 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 Paragraph. The First Nations Version New Testament was birthed out of a desire to provide an English Bible that connects in a culturally relevant way to the traditional heart languages of the over 6 million English speaking First Nations people of North America. Skipping down, this translation was first envisioned by Terry Wildman. A while later, the First Nations Version Translation Council was formed. And so it was a collaborative, Terry Wildman got the ball going, but then it was a collaborative effort that included Native North Americans from over 25 tribes. And and there is a list of like the members of the council, but then they also in had reviews from like an additional 15 or 18 tribes. So yeah, I'm I'm loving this translation of the New Testament.
Well, I'm going to have to look at that. Thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Well, I've not every time I pick it up, but a few times when I've picked it up and I'm reading from it, I have thought I need to find out what Victoria thinks because I'm enamored with it, and just getting the stories that are in the New Testament from, like, it's the truth of the story, but even in the language that is used, it's so, I don't even have the language to describe how it is impacting me, except that it it is more poetic. It is more meaningful in terms of some of the names that are used for, if you've read for our watchers, viewers, listeners, if you've read the New Testament or if you grew up with the New Testament to read the stories from with a different language and from the collective experience versus the personal individual bias. It's just beautiful. So
Well, I will have to read it and we'll have to have a conversation, Tracy.
I would love that. Maybe what we do is we come back in the last couple of months of the year, and we just do a whole show about this book.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Yeah, I'd love to do that. Well, I'll make one comment about it. It's really interesting that Americans and maybe Western people in general have a bias, and they'll always say, "We don't want to be tribal," right? And it's denigrated. And yet, the most influential book in the West has been the Bible, written by tribal people and
Yes,
nomadic tribal people at that, right?
yes,
And I find that ironic and just amazing, that this collection of stories that speaks to the human experience, has had such staying power and yet can be denigrated at the same time.
at the same time. It is
Mhm.
what we do, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you just really want to get on the table before we close out today's show?
Well, I would just like to mention a couple of people today, and one of them, and someone that I really enjoy reading is Lucy Tapahanso, and she's like a contemporary of mine, and she is a Dene poet, and she writes such wonderful, wonderful poetry. It's amazing, and I invite everyone to get one of her books, and just go through it, because these poems are so deep. They're very simple about life, and they're wonderful. And as a younger person, I was very anti-colonial, and we have to decolonize. And one of the things that I mean, this sounds funny, but I'll say it. One of the things is something that has kind of been considered a native food is fry bread. Well, it's not a native food. It's an introduced food that really is not very good for us. And, there's all kinds of stuff that, we can say that it's not good. But I changed my mind after I read a poem by um, Lucy Tampahanso that dealt with when the Dene people were forcibly marched to a fort away from their homelands, and they were detained there for several years. And she talks about that terrible, terrible time, and how the people learned how to make fry bread, right? And and she turns it all on its head to look at that as a part of the resilience of the people. And it just absolutely changed my mind about how to view um, this. And I love her for that, because it was done very simply, very, very straightforward, in a very straightforward manner, and beautifully. So Lucy Tapahanso, and she is a wonderful person, and just an incredible writer. So if you have a chance, and just go and read some of her poetry, buy some of her books, look her up online, listen to her voice. She has a beautifully sweet voice. And then the other person that probably more people are familiar with, if you do read the Science of Mind magazine, is Joy Harjo. And she is a Muskogee poet, and she was the poet laureate of the United States for 2 terms. And she just recently uh, finished her last term as the poet laureate. And she was on the cover of the Science of Mind magazine, I think in February or earlier in the year. I can't remember which month it was, but I am Muskogee. Joy is Muskogee, and we're cousins, and she is just a wonderful, wonderful poet. This is a new book that she did, and that is a children's book. She's done a couple of children's books, and her poetry has been transformative, and I'll use that word for so many people. And I would say that both Lucy and Joy come out of a period of time when there was a lot of reclamation of cultural practices, reclamation of story, reclamation of the way that we speak, just that reclamation and put into the context that was accessible to everyone. And I think that both of them are grounded in spirit. That's all I can say. They're both grounded in spirit. So if you have a chance, pick up those two poets and add them to your collection, and you won't regret it. You'll enjoy it. You'll find something there for you for every occasion. Every occasion.
Well, I am already a Joy Harjo fan, and now I will be checking out Lucy Tapahanso and her writing, because I'm always looking for, new inspiration. And I do believe, as you do, that poetry can be an entryway into our connection with the deepest spiritual beliefs that are true across or through so many different traditions. And so it is when it is the truth of life, when it is the truth of being, then it doesn't matter whether we put it under religion A, spiritual practice B, or philosophy C. It's just the truth.
Exactly. And we find the truth everywhere if we're open to it, right?
That's right. So yeah, this always happens. I am lucky enough um, to have wonderful people like you and others who come on and we have a conversation, but we have limited time. That is the only thing that I don't like about doing this show.
Well, it's
So
always good to be
I
with
want
you.
to thank you. Thank you for saying yes, and thank you for sharing your perspective about poetry, prayer, and practice, and reminding us all of the importance of transformation in our lives.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you for inviting me.
Everybody, remember that we are here every Tuesday at noon Mountain Time. And we dive into what is happening and what can we do in our lives to really, really integrate poetry, prayer, and spiritual practice. This month, we've had some pretty amazing featured guests, and I want to alert you that coming up to kick off August is Reverend Dr. David Alt. Reverend Dr. David Alt will be joining us. That would be July. Oops, that is not the right graphic, but I do want to say thank you to the folks who were with me in July. But David Alt will be with me next week. If you are not familiar with David Alt, then you definitely don't want to miss next week's show, because then you will know what all the rest of us know. And then other guests coming up during the month. So don't hesitate, mark your calendars for Tuesdays at noon Mountain Time. My name is Tracy Brown. I'm so glad you joined in today, and hopefully I will see you again real soon.